protected is up to us to be involved, and they're very receptive and very interested in public input. Valle de Oro is a very young refuge. It was formerly a farm, and they're just kind of slowly turning it over. They're having their first work day coming up in September, and they asked if I would mention that as well tonight when I talk about the community update, so people can come out and take part in the first trail making that they're going to do. They have in the future, but this might be the very far future, native bee, some work they want to do with native bees. Maybe something like an interpretive trail with signs. They're not really sure because they have so many things to do while they're launching this wildlife refuge, but that's kind of maybe in the distant future. But there are lots of ways to get involved and make sure that this does, that we do have a nice wildlife area, and they are very, very, very interested in public input. So, if you're interested and if you are concerned about things that are in the news currently, please come get involved and consider attending the community update in November. So, last month, for those of you that were here, we had landscape architect come and speak about his work designing parks and different things and trying to make sure that they're pollinator friendly. And one of the questions that had come up was, well, how do we get involved? How do we get involved in these commissions and these committees that are sort of at this city and county level that are making these decisions that then ultimately affect how areas get designed? So I posted this on ABQ Beeks, but I wanted to mention it again. The Open Space Advisory Board has a vacancy coming up on September 1st. The Parks and Rec Advisory Board has 2 vacancies right now, currently. The Open Space Advisory Board had a meeting today. I didn't pay attention to it, I was busy, but there was one today, and then the next one is August 28th. The Parks and Rec has their next meeting on September 4th. So these are public meetings to go be involved in, even if you aren't necessarily interested in becoming on, joining the committee. But that was one of the things that came out of our discussion last month was how do we make sure that our parks are pollinator friendly, and that when we make them pollinator friendly, there isn't any pushback, where is the green grass? Why isn't it being heavily herbicided, heavily fertilized? Why isn't it looking what people are sort of thinking that a park is supposed to look like? Well, it's because we're trying to make it more friendly for pollinators. So we want to make sure that more people that have that knowledge are involved in that. So that's an opportunity to get involved, and I wanted to keep highlighting that. And sort of based out of that, this is the park that he had said got labeled Weed Park, because when he planted it for the pollinators, that was how it looked for when it first started. And I was talking to him about, is this a very picnic-friendly park? And Amy and I were talking about this too. We'd love to go up and have like a little ABQ Beeks pollinator picnic day. And he said he would love to get our feedback too, because he's been up there a couple times. He'd love to hear, after telling us about the park, he'd love to hear what we think about it. A couple dates, we've been going back and forth because the fair's coming up. August 25th, that might be a good day, so keep your eye out for that. And please come along and let's plan a little picnic day. We can go up to the park and take a look and see if that's what we want our parks to look like, and if that meets all of the needs of a park as well as being pollinator friendly. And the last thing I have is, so coming up around the exact same time at the fair is the North American Mite-a-thon from September 8th through September 15th. In 1 week, we want to get as many people as possible to go out and do their mite checks and record that information at this website, mitecheck.com. So this is from that website. The objective is to, get more information out there about the mites. If you go to that website, and that I did post on ABQ Beeks, if you go to that website, there's a list down at the bottom of resources. Bee Informed Partnership, Honeybee Health Coalition, how to do a mite check, mite life cycle, what the effects are on bees, what to look for, all that information, all the resources you need as a beekeeper. When you look at the information from last year, we had nobody from Albuquerque recording any information. There was one, or I think maybe 2 beekeepers from Las Cruces who recorded some, but that really skews the results when they're trying to, kind of get a grip on what is working, what isn't working, so that then they have a more informed, they're more informed, and then they come out and do trainings and tell people how to take care of their bees. So this is how we contribute to them. It's the Citizen Science Project, by giving them all of our data. I wanted to emphasize that the last line, the information does not get connected to you. Your name doesn't stay to it, so how your individual apiary is doing doesn't get communicated in the data. But if we can go to the website now, so the website that you go and put your data in looks like this. You click on Take the Survey, you put in all your information, you put the date that you're gathering, so ideally we're going to try to do it in that September 8th week, depending on how many hives you have. Right here you add, if you're entering 2 hives, if you're entering 3 hives, you just add as many as you have. You enter what you did. They're asking that you do your mite counts through either a sugar roll or the alcohol wash. And then you can just fill out some survey information. What is it that you individually have been doing to treat? What is your varroa management technique that you're using? Then they just take all that data, collect it, and they get a feel for what's working, what's not working, which states are really struggling, which aren't. It's a great way to contribute to the information that they're doing when they're going out and collecting. This way they have, a larger chunk of data. So I'm going to be pushing this and encouraging it as we approach the Mite-a-thon week in September. And I thought that I would mention it at this meeting because this meeting is before that week happens. Yes?
So this is kind of nitpicky, but I'm wondering if they want us to all do the sampling at the same time? Or just record it?
Well, it doesn't matter. You can sample anytime you want. If you actually go back to that website today, it shows a picture of the United States today, and we have some data for Albuquerque today. So somebody has recently recorded theirs.
Okay.
But during the Mite-a-thon and their annual information, they didn't have any last year from our area. So I really, really wanted to encourage us, because some of the other mite information I looked at, we had very low reporting numbers. And so that can really skew your results if you have only the people who lost their hives to mites, or only the people who had 0 mite problems. That's really not going to help gauge how we're handling it here, and if we need to, if we're doing well, or if maybe we need to change up some treatments, or maybe we need to invite some more speakers. It's just hard to get a real feel for it when there's very low reporting numbers. So I want to really, really encourage everybody. So you can mite check whenever you want. You can record it whenever you want. But the North American Mite-a-thon is in September, and so I'm going to try to encourage everybody during that week to do a mite check. And I think they chose that week. I believe last year they did it in August, so I think they chose that week so it's a little bit closer into winter, so that it's maybe not conflicting with some people's honey harvest. It's really difficult because some people have a fall flow. It's so regional. Some people have a fall flow and they don't want to be doing treatments and testing right then. Some do. So I think nationwide they kind of tried to pick a week that would work really well, and that's the week they picked this year. So those are all of my announcements. If anybody wants a poster or has any questions, please come up and ask me afterwards. And when we kind of break up into our neighborhoods, this might be something you want to talk about too, because you might be able to find a more experienced beekeeper who you could get some help with, or a less experienced beekeeper that you could help. We might be able to group varroa check. I know that I'm a little uncomfortable varroa checking alone. I really prefer to do my beekeeping collectively. I like to have friends with me when I beekeep. So that's something to keep in mind too, is maybe as a neighborhood you can say, hey, let's check on each other's bees, and have a little bit of a give and take and a share for that. So thank you so much for letting me talk for a minute.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's a lot of good information and a lot of good things going on. And I do want to announce that this camera is on, and the reason we're recording is we want to share information with the Grant County beekeepers so that they can also benefit from our meetings and whatnot. And I just wanted to share that so that while I'm discussing fall management, if anyone wants to share or ask questions, I just want you to know that it's being recorded, and the way we're sharing it with the Grant County beekeepers is through a YouTube channel that we're going to have so that we can all access information like meetings and whatnot. So I hope that's something that excites you, that you're interested in, and not something that kind of turns you off. But anyways, we'll go ahead and get started. And like I said, I would love for this to be more of a discussion. So if you want to share anything while I'm talking, just go ahead. So fall management, preparing for winter. And I think this is really one of the most vital times of beekeeping, because what we do in fall affects how our hives are going to be in spring. And if we don't properly care for them right before winter, they're not going to make it. So, let's see. So first we're going to talk about requeening. And I think this is more of like a commercial beekeeping practice where they'll requeen their hives every year, just so that they know they have a young queen in that hive that's laying well. But I know for us backyard beekeepers and hobbyists, that's not something we want to do, especially if we have a good queen that we know is awesome. We don't want to requeen every year. And queen bees can live 3 to 4 years. And from other sources I've read, though, they can live even longer than that, 5 or 6. So, without all the pesticides and things we do to the bees. So, yeah. And I also wanted to talk about, so I'll go back, I forgot about this. So before going into winter, you do want to know, how is your queen doing? How healthy is she? And when you're analyzing your queen health, you really need to think about it in context. So like last year, for example, I had a queen that so she mated late in the year. It was, I think, in late July, maybe the beginning of August, so it was super late. So she didn't have much time to kind of get going. There was a dearth, and I was like, this queen is just not doing well. I think she laid maybe like 2 frames the whole season, and I thought to myself, I don't want to get rid of her because she hasn't had a chance to do her thing yet. We haven't been on a nectar flow, there's no pollen, she really hasn't just had a chance to do her thing. So I was like, I'm just going to leave her and see what happens and see what she does when there's good conditions. So this year, she is actually probably one of my best layers, and that hive is just going crazy and doing awesome. So I think when you're evaluating your queen and her health, make sure you're considering what's going on in your environment. And yeah, don't just think it's the queen right away. It might be a problem with food, nectar flow, pollen, things like that. So yeah, give your queens a chance. And then, let's see, bees going into winter. So when you think about it, all the bees that you have in your hive the queen's the only bee that, I'm like lost in my thoughts right now. Sorry guys, I'm nervous, I think, because the camera. But the bees that overwinter are winter bees, right? And the only bee in your hive right now that's gone through the winter is your queen. And so winter bees emerge in August, and those are the fatter bees. And I kind of geeked out on this winter bee idea. And so I was kind of wondering, like, what makes a bee a winter bee? Like, why are they fatter? Are they genetically different? How does this happen? What spurs this on? And so I did some research, and it turns out that they are genetically the same as a worker bee, but they have larger fat stores, and I'll get into that more on the next slide. But first I want to talk about why winter bees are so important. And if you think about going into winter, there's less pollen, and so they need more protein. And these winter bees, their fat stores are able to store more of that protein in the vitalogenin, and so this vitalogenin increases their lifespan, it enhances their immune system, and it allows the bees, like I said, to secrete brood food even in the absence of pollen. So I was thinking, like, wow, these winter bees are actually really important, and you want to make sure your hive is producing them in August. So yeah, and another thing I read that I thought was interesting is these winter bees, their hypopharyngeal glands are larger, and so I'm guessing that's probably just to produce more of the phytogenin. So I posted a picture of bees up here, and I wanted to see. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
What triggers the queen to start doing winter bees?
I'll talk about that in the next slide. I was getting ahead of myself because it's really interesting and exciting. But before that, so look at these two pictures. Which one do you think is the winter bees? Anyone else want to? Bottom? So the top is actually a picture of winter bees, and yeah, they're fat. And when I was looking at this, I thought it was interesting because you can kind of see how their abdomen and thorax meet more, and their abdomen kind of hugs their thorax, like right up against it. Do you see what I'm talking about? Yeah. So I thought that was really neat that you can physically see it.
They're not foraging.
Yeah, they're not foraging and flying. They just get to hang out in the hive. Yeah. Which can be, I don't know, kind of sad. Kind of sad for a bee just to hang out in the hive. So, comb potatoes. I like that. So Mark asked, what triggers a queen to lay winter bees? And it's not necessarily the queen that's triggered, it's a lack of pollen coming into the hive that triggers winter bee production. So when the larva has less protein, it triggers winter bee traits. So when they're protein deficient, those winter bee traits come around. And so I don't know if it's exactly how that happened, but it triggers a change in their phytogenin and fat stores and whatnot. So I also thought it was interesting to think about it's pollen, not temperature, that triggers these winter bees to be produced. So
people have to be careful to not feed any pollen with the dirt.
Right,
They don't
and
got winter bees.
right. So that's actually what I was going to talk about next. So I guess I have a good flow going. Go ahead, Mark.
So it seems like in the fall around here we have tons of pollen.
I know my all of my hives have like frames
So why would it
packed
happen
with
in August?
pollen. But is it less than maybe earlier in the year? I don't know.
Maybe
I don't
they
know.
start later than here because we have a longer, our winter
Yeah.
months.
I'm thinking Lulu's right that our winter bees are maybe a little later and the pollen decreases later, like September, October. And I wanted to ask too, has anyone looked at their hives and noticed like, wow, these bees are fatter? Maybe they're winter bees? No?
Today.
I think I've seen some. Okay.
The pollen's getting pretty slim.
Yeah. And where are you located, if you don't mind me asking?
Candelaria.
Okay. Interesting. Mark, did you, or Elizabeth?
Well, I was going to say, and it isn't necessarily completely quantity of pollen as much as the nutritional content.
Ah.
The protein could change significantly with what's in bloom in fall compared to what's blooming in the spring and summer. So
Interesting.
it might be that as well. It's just that overall protein content.
So like a lower protein content than the pollen? Interesting. I'd love to know if like flowers that bloom later have lower protein content. Cool. Okay. So, oh yeah, I didn't share that part. Biologists believe that the bees evolved to have this trait when they started moving into colder climates so that they could survive a dearth in a winter.
So what about Africanized bees? They don't do this, right?
I'm thinking they wouldn't as much, yeah. So yeah, like Lulu said, feeding pollen in fall and later would probably not be the best idea just because your protein content in the hive is going to stay high, and so you're not going to have that production of winter bees that have more phytogenin. So did anyone else have thoughts on that, on protein and pollen feeding in fall? Okay. And then I love that Elizabeth talked about varroa mites and the mitathon because this is so important, especially going into winter. And I lost every hive, every time until I finally learned I need to test for mites and treat for mites. And I could even look in my hives that I lost and just see varroa mites all over the bees and all over the bottom of the hive. It's awful. So it's really important to test and treat for mites before the end of the foraging season. Yeah, because they're just not going to make it if their mite load's too high. And another important thing to consider with fall management is making sure they have high quality food. And like we all know, honey is the best source of food for the bees, not our sugar. But if we have to, we do need to feed them. And so feeding them like fruit juices, I don't know how that became a thing, but that's not a good idea because it can ferment and also cause dysentery in the bees. And also, like I said, honey is the best food source for bees, but you want to make sure you know where that honey is coming from. You don't want to feed your bees honey from an unknown hive because it could carry foul brood or other things and make your bees sick. So if you have honey from your hives that you want to feed your bees, that's great. I've done that and I just plop it in the back of my top bar hive. Other than that, the next best thing to honey is sugar, and so sugar syrup can be used. And in the fall, you're thinking about winter, so you don't want the bees to have a lot of water content in the hive. So you feed them a two parts. Did I put 2 parts water and 1 part sugar? That should be 2 part. Is that right? Okay.
You can go to 1 to 1.
1 to 1. Okay. Yeah, I was like, that doesn't seem right. My apologies. So you want to feed them a 1 to 1 ratio of sugar and water. And then a rule of thumb is don't feed your bees sugar syrup after the daytime high is below 60, because then you're going to see more condensation building up in your hive, and I think at that time it's best to just put fondant or sugar in your hive itself. So Chris?
Yeah, last year we used Man Lake's commercial liquid bee feed, and we had a higher survival rate. Plus, we also insulated. We live up at just a couple blocks west of Tramway, and moved out here.
Do you know what's in the Man Lake bee feed?
Say again?
Do you know what's in the Man Lake bee feed by any chance?
I know this food is liquid. We didn't do any sugar feeding at all. And I know that it's designed to help fatten the bees and help with their digestive tract. And it's it's not just fructose or dextrose, it's a multi-sugar-based feed.
Nice.
And I buy it by the 5-gallon buckets, but commercial. People buy it by the tanker.
Tanks, yeah.
And it's not cheap, but we really, between
You've seen a difference?
insulating, we use those hive koozies, and we had a much better survival rate. We had a very low, hardly any mite problem at all going into the
Nice.
We're going to do some repeat samples.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Did anyone else want to share anything on how they feed in the fall?
Well, also, if you have fruit trees and the fruit is dropping and possibly rotting, I make sure I have figs, and I have so many figs right now, the birds knock them off. So I pick up all my fruit off the ground, and when I put it in my compost pile, and make sure it's really covered, because sometimes I do see bees and other creatures on it, so just be aware of that too.
Thanks, Lou. And then, go ahead, Mark.
I'd like to put a plug in for just putting a thing of sugar in before when you close up your hive. It does 2 things. They'll eat it when they need to, and it always is hard when I get it out in the spring because it's been absorbing all that water.
Yeah, I was actually going to share that before this last winter, my bees are just starving out at my place, and I was like, I don't want to be putting sugar water in there right now. It's starting to get pretty cold. So I cracked open the back and I literally poured in, because I had about that much space in the back. So I cracked it open and I poured a whole bag of, I guess it's 1 pound. so bad at that. I had poured a whole 1 pound bag in the back of the hive, and I was like, let's just see what it does, you know. And so, like you said, it soaked up a lot of the moisture, and the bees ate about 3/4 of it throughout the winter. So I thought that was neat, and it overwintered pretty well. So if you want to try that. And I also got some fondant with like lemongrass and I think it was just lemongrass, but that seemed to work well too.
So how much, Mark, how much sugar do you put in your hive?
Oh, I don't use that much. I basically, it's a container like this, about an inch thick. They never finish the whole thing, but getting it out of there is really hard because it's been soaking up all that moisture that's in the hive.
Yeah, I didn't even have to take any out, unfortunately. I'm not putting any more hives out there. Okay, so how much honey is enough? And I think this has been, obviously it differs by region, right? If you're in a colder area, they need more honey to survive the winter because they're using more energy. So the rule of thumb with top bar hives is to leave bars 1 through 12 and possibly 15 if it's a colder area. And I didn't realize this until later, but you also need to consider what each bar looks like. Does each bar have a thin row of honey, or is it a nice thick row like this? That's really important to consider as well, to know if they have enough food stores to get through winter. Because you can have 20 bars and just have a tiny bit of honey at the top. So you really need to think holistically how much honey is on each frame, and not just counting bars. So I think that's kind of important to consider. And I wanted people to share, especially laying people, because I'm not very knowledgeable about layings, just how much honey you leave and maybe share what area you're in. Does anyone want to share kind of their rule of thumb for their area and how much honey they leave?
Okay. So rule of thumb is typically 40 pounds to 60 pounds, depending on which area you live in as far as the laying. 40 pounds is, for single-story hive, for here in Albuquerque, you probably leave 4 frames of honey equivalent on each level. And then if you're living out in East Mountains where I live, you want to do 5 frames of honey. And it can be mixed in there. Usually the 2 outside frames will be full of honey. And then I'll make sure that there's one somewhere in the center or an equivalent of that. And they do pretty well. I always err on the side of caution with the bees and leave them more honey than I hope that they'll use. If you do that, they go through the spring really well.
Do you leave your honey leave the brood nest in the middle when you do it in the winter for light, or do you move all the honey away in?
No, I move it in the middle. So when I manage the bees and stuff, I try to make sure all the brood is concise together and down on the bottom. And there'll be some up on top, and I'll have more honey up on top and stuff if it's 2 stories. I've had hives where they're 3 stories, and Amy brought up a good point. It's important to know what your hives look like, or your comb looks like. If it's all full of brood, they don't have any honey. I've had hives that were 3 stories high, and the bottom 2 stories, the top story was all honey. The bottom 2 stories was just full of bees, though there was very little honey in there, and so I left all 3 boxes on there, so they had a super full of honey to get through the winter.
Thank you, Craig. And one thing I thought was interesting, and Mark kind of hinted at it, is with the top bar hive, you leave 1 or 2 bars of honey in the front, and then the rest in the back. And then the bees throughout the winter will kind of pull that towards the center on warmer days. And some people that do top bar hives advise not putting a bar of honey in the center, just so that you don't break up the cluster, or so they don't stop at that bar of honey and think there's no more beyond that. So I don't know, it might be different with layings and top bars. It sounds like it. So I just thought I'd share that. And also, go ahead.
Craig, do you do anything to winterize your hives in Tier C? Or is it warm enough down there that they forage all year?
So I have yet to winterize my hives down in TRC. But it definitely is warmer. They're gonna be on a honey flow longer down there. Same rule of thumb though, they just won't need as much honey down there. But you still definitely want to leave, like, you know, I would do it like here in Albuquerque and make sure they had at least 4 frames per box of honey. So Arizona, when you have your bees in Arizona,
You don't have to winterize them at all.
they're on a honey flow all the time.
Yeah, they do just fine all winter.
Right, so
That's why they're all Africanized.
that's right.
And then, go ahead, Lulu.
So our bees were flying last year, so I made sure, and think about it this year too, we don't know what our winter will be. I always leave way more honey now because you just never know.
And it was interesting because around Thanksgiving, even though we had freezes out in East Mountains, the bees were still bringing in pollen. And it's like, where in the sample are you getting the pollen from? They were bringing in pollen around Thanksgiving time, so.
They had a day-down catalog.
It's all that rabbit rush.
And one thing I thought was interesting that I never really thought about until I was kind of doing more research for this presentation is that honey serves as a temperature equalizer. So if you think about it, like during the day it's warm, the honey gets warm, and it's going to stay warm longer than the air around it. So I thought that was interesting to also think about when you're looking at your hive and considering how much honey to leave. And then another thing, Craig kind of brought this up, is I like to think about, well, how many bees are in my hive that are probably going to overwinter? You know, is it a big colony? Is it a smaller colony? And yeah, so I think if it's like a huge colony, maybe you want to put a little more, or leave a little more honey in there. And then we talked about this some last time. That's my daughter Claire. I had to add that and put it in. You don't want to unite colonies to unite weak colonies. So you don't want to put a weak colony or diseased colony with a healthy one, because obviously they're going to get sick or infected with mites or disease. But yeah, when you're going into the fall, you want to look at your hives, and if you have small hives, you might want to combine them. But I found that a lot of my hives did well overwintering with just a few frames, the smaller hives. So I don't know if anyone wanted to share maybe some experience with overwintering smaller hives, but I've had some pretty good luck with overwintering like 5 frames, bars, and then putting a follower board behind it. So I don't know. Craig?
Yeah. So same thing, I've had bees out in Macintosh property, a nuke, 5-frame nuke. I had them full of bees where they were ready to move into a single-story hive, but it was getting close to winter, so I left them in a nuke. I had bees that were 5 frames, 6 frames of bees that were in a single-story hive that I should have reduced. Out in Macintosh, no wind protection, everything else, the nukes actually did better than the single-story hives did, because they had the bees to control in that space that they had instead of the larger space where they had to try to maintain that a little bit more. So,
Yeah. Thanks, Craig.
bees. It's all about having the bees.
Trying to look at the time. Okay. And yeah, when you're combining hives, Marlene Brown, last meeting or meeting before, talked about the newspaper method, and you obviously want to keep the better queen when you're combining them, and maybe give your other queen away, or yeah, I have a hard time killing queens. But I wanted to share Crowder's 2-queen system. Has anyone heard of that? Read about it? So I tried it this last winter. And what you do is in a top bar hive, you put 2 colonies in the same box, and you put a divider board in the middle. So you have a queen on this side and a queen on this side. Obviously make sure you open an entrance on that other side. And so what you do is they're both small, and you want them both to get through the winter, so you have them in the same box so they can kind of share some of that heat. And then coming into spring, after they've kind of gotten going a little bit, you move one colony to another hive, I have to think about this for a little bit. Yeah, you move both queens with some brood and bees to 2 different hives. So you have 3 hives total. Does that make sense? So both queens go to a new hive. Did I lose you?
Well,
So you have your-
someone's gonna get killed.
No one gets killed. That's why I loved this. Okay, so you have your always start over. So you have your original box with 2 queens, and you're gonna take both of those queens and put them both in new hives, and leave
Same hive?
no new hives. So
Maybe 2 new.
1 hive over here,
Okay.
1 hive over here, and then here's your original hive. And in that original hive, leave some open brood so they can raise a new queen. And if you're on a nectar flow in spring, when they come into spring and they're on a flow, those bees don't have a lot of brood to take care of, and you took the queens out, and they're starting to get going in other hives. And so you have this big flow of honey, because that's all the bees have to do, and then they raise a new queen. And it's really neat to see, and I actually was able to do it successfully this year. It was just like super exciting. So we got a lot of honey. We didn't have to kill one queen, the weaker queen. They both overwintered in the same box, and so I just had a lot of fun doing it and trying it out. And so I think it's really something to maybe consider with a top bar hive. Just get the follower board, put it in the middle, and then I got caulk. And I just caulked around the bottom so that the bees wouldn't obviously go to the other side, because the follower board isn't going to seal it completely. So
Was it a full 29 bar hive?
yeah, this was a full.
15 too?
Yeah, this was a full 29 bar hive that I did it on. But yeah, you could probably do smaller. But it was really fun to see how that played out. So it worked well. So any questions about that?
I'm just gonna say you do it with the Langstroth hive as well. Just split it. And you can actually do a wafer board with the pegs, and it allows the heat. People do that all the time with the Langstroth hives.
What's a wafer board?
Yeah, what's a wafer board?
Yeah, it's like a masonite board with holes in it.
Oh, okay. I know that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Peg
I
board.
know the peg board.
Peg board.
Yeah.
It's small enough holes that the bees can't get through it, but
Yeah.
it allows heat to go through. People will actually do 2 stories and have 4 nukes in the
That's
same
so
hive,
cool.
and 4 different entrances and stuff, and that will maintain the temperature better.
Nice. Anyone else want to share or questions? That's awesome. I didn't hear about other people doing that. Go ahead.
I've been coming to these meetings for a while, and for top bar hives, I've heard to keep at least 7 to 14 bars for your hive. TJ is a 14 bar guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's best to err on the side of caution, yeah.
I left 16 in my hive last time, so.
But I did just want to share that I have had some overwinter well that were smaller, so. Let's see. So the hive body, Craig kind of shared a little bit about this. But I love watching the bees as the days get colder and shorter, seeing how the bees propolize the entrance and make it smaller. So it's nice when they do that for you, but they don't always, and it gets cold. And so if they have it, you might want to reduce it to a smaller size so that mice can't get in and they have less space that they have to guard. And with my top bar, this is my top bar here, I just use that little entrance cover and I put it to the side. So, does anyone want to share about entrance reducing?
When I put a little reducer on there, but also when they propolize it, it's at an angle, so it's almost like a wind tunnel to cut down on the wind. It's really cool.
I didn't think about that, but I've seen that. It is at an angle. And yeah, it's like they make little bee-sized holes and cover them up one by one. It's really fun. And then the hive body, so I like to let the bees decide how much they're going to propolize the vent and then kind of leave it alone. I feel like they know better than I do. But this winter I saw a lot of condensation on the window and coming out of the entrance, and I was like, wow, I have a problem. So I went in there and I scraped the propolis off the vent so that they had more ventilation. And I was going to ask you, Lulu, you seem to know a lot more about ventilation in the hive. Did you want to share anything?
I cut a lot. I take a 1.5 inch hole saw, and I cut in the back. I cut two. I actually on the north side, I put 2 of those holes from like 1 inch down and 1 inch towards the top, and then on the other side I'll also. And then I have one of those like little eave vents, kind of little round eave vents that will fit right in there, and I put some screening on it. And they tend to propolis it, but I never really have much problem. They're going to do what they do, and I give them a lot of options to propolis or not. So I have a lot of holes in mine, and they'll do what they have to do with it.
Yeah, I like that. Give them more options, more holes to cover up and take away propolis from. So
Also, sometimes it's better not to have a perfect looking hive, because even if your bars sometimes warp a little bit, there's space for the ventilation there, and if it's a little funky, there's more space, and they'll propolis it if they have to. Otherwise, there is more release of the condensation. So it doesn't have to look perfect.
yeah, good point. And another thing is when I noticed all that water, I actually was talking to Lulu a lot, so I was like, I've never seen this much condensation, what do I do? And I hadn't tilted my hives yet, and so that's one thing that can help with the water content when it condensates is to raise the back of your hive by a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch so that it runs down instead of, down at an angle instead of down on your bees. So, and then I don't know a lot of people around here that wrap their hives like in roofing paper or quilts. Does anyone do that? You shared, Chris, that you do. When you do that, you just want to make sure it's well ventilated. And I know out at our place in the East Mountains, we have some cedar trees that provide a really good windbreak. And from what I've read and seen, and I could be wrong, but it seems that natural windbreaks seem to work better than fake ones. But you could also use like hay bales and whatnot. But it's just important to know that cold wind is what's really going to cool down your hive and make your bees have to work harder to stay warm. So if you can block the wind, do that.
I use bamboo screens sometimes too to help block down the wind too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Bamboo
screens. Bamboo.
Hay bales, trees, and then I think, make sure your hives are in a place, speaking of trees, deciduous trees are good because they have leaves that provide shade in the summer, and then those leaves fall off and the sun can shine on your hives in the winter and warm it up a little bit. Let's see, so we talked about that. I kind of laugh that I put this on here. Don't place hives where damp, cold air settles at night. I'm laughing because there's not many places in New Mexico where that happens. And then hive manipulation. So I think we talked about a lot of this already, which is good because it came naturally in the conversation. But one thing we didn't talk about is considering where the bees place pollen and honey. So late fall is probably not the best time to be manipulating your hive a whole lot because the bees are going to put the honey where they need it. They know how they're going to move around in that cluster throughout the winter and where they're going to go and get that honey. So if you're moving things around a lot, they might have to move more in that cluster or break the cluster up. So it's best to do it sooner rather than later.
I can show. How far into the fall do you decide it's your last time you're going to be doing inspection and your last time you're going to be opening your hive?
Good question. I think really just paying attention to the weather and what's going on in your area. For me in the East Mountains, it's probably a little earlier. I don't get into my hives after the end of September, first week of October out there. Does anyone else want to share how it is where they're at in their area? I know one person, I think last year, was harvesting honey in mid-October though, in Albuquerque. So I wouldn't recommend that. I'm just saying there's a really big variation depending on where you live and the winter and the weather and climate change. So, yeah.
Kind of keep an eye on the bees too. I mean, how much activity is there?
Yeah.
'Cause they've already propolised the bars. If you start breaking those down, they're not gonna be able to propolis the bars.
Yeah. And that's it. If I missed anything that you want to share, please do, or if you have any questions. Elizabeth?
So one thing I was hoping you would talk about are like yellow jackets and wasps, because that's what got me last fall. And I was all prepared for varroa, I was all prepared for not taking too much honey, but I kept telling myself, I kept seeing one yellow jacket and one yellow jacket, and I kept saying, well, a strong hive can handle that. And then one morning I came out and it was a killing field. Bees were just chopped in half all over and they were flying away with my bees. It was horrifying. So I was really ill prepared for that. And I was wondering if last year was a particularly bad fall for yellow jackets, or if other people deal with that. I know that the different yellow jacket traps are pretty successful, but I was just curious if that was an anomaly and I just had bad luck, or if that tends to happen a lot to people.
So I had one hive, there was that small hive last year where I was like, I just want to kind of see what this queen does. And so they were a small hive, weak, not very big, hadn't gotten going, and I had some yellow jackets too, and I could just sit there and like, I'm admitting this on camera, I would just smash them, you know, and obviously that doesn't do a lot. There can be tons of yellow jackets, but I reduced the entrance and then I moved the feeder into the hive so that I didn't attract them. So I know there's things you can do to kind of help, but I'm not sure. It sounds like you had a lot of yellow jackets.
So did you reduce your entrance?
Yeah, but too late. I kept seeing one, and those were the scouts, and I wish I had considered it more of a threat, because then by the time I realized it was a threat, they had already marked my hive, come back, attacked bees, and I lost so many bees. And I had not, I had an upper entrance, and the bees were starting to propolis that, but I kept saying, well, it's not too late, so I'll let them do their thing, and I wish I had intervened just a tad sooner.
So I'm just thinking out loud, you know, like at picnics and stuff, because wasps like the sugar or the meat, people will take carbonated soda, or orange particular, and put some in a bowl, and the wasps will leave their food alone and go to the bowl with the carbonated sodas, the orange soda or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe you can kind of give them someplace else to go. I don't know. That's.
This year I'll have to, I'll lure them if it's a problem again. I just had not expected it.
Yeah. Has anyone else had a big problem with yellow jackets?
Well, if you watch them, you can find out, you know, that they often have a hive nearby, their own hive. So we were happily destroying, you know, their hives. Of course, I wondered, you know, like, there's a place for sharks in the ecosystem, is there a place for wasps? But on the other hand, we didn't want these wasp hives, you know, right above our entrance. But we had 3 or 4. So if you just watch them, you'll find a nearby home for the wasps. So.
Are you talking about paper wasps or yellow jackets?
Yellow jackets.
Right. Because yellow jackets live in the ground. They have their nests in the ground.
The ones
The paper wasps, they don't tend to bother too much. They're not quite as aggressive, and they are extremely beneficial insects. They eat a lot of the aphids and little mites and other things. And they will go down, I've seen them, they come where the dead bees are, underneath my hive, and
they don't ever.
if they try to buzz a little bit, my bees, and if I see that happening, I'll reduce my entrance for sure. And you know, the bees will go on their side and they're trying to sting them and stuff, so.
If you get too many of them, could that be a problem?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But I guess that just encourages us to kind of keep an eye on our beehives. Because not only are bees stressed, but every other insect, every species on this planet is being stressed these days. So of course they're going to try to find opportunities.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the nature these days.
What about big critters too? Because I remember at one point, your neighborhood had spotted a bear.
Yeah.
Is that more of a problem coming out of winter or the fall going into winter?
So with the bears, I know they aren't really after the honey, they're after the brood because it provides more protein and they want to get fattened up before winter. So it's like now, August, September, October, that you really need to look out for bears. So we have our fence up, which is unplugged right now. So it's probably time for me to, get that going again. Yeah, but I haven't had any problems with other big critters.
I've tried the commercial traps, commercial traps, what do they call it, the waspinator or something like that. It didn't work.
Good to know.
That I know of, I did not find a single dead wasp in those traps. And we tried the other one where you fill up looks like a paper wasp hive, you fill it with plastic bags, and that's supposed to, because wasps like being in territory, and it's supposed to, if they see a hive visually, they'll stay away from the area. Well, a lot of our bees get their water from our water feature, which is in our courtyard, and so I put one up in a crepe myrtle tree there, and it just kind of didn't work either. I don't know, because the wasps kept coming to get the water.
Yeah.
And I call them sweat bees. They will feed on your dead bees outside your hive. And that's why bees tend to carry the dead a little further away from the hive. And if you find a lot of dead bees in an area, clean them up.
Yeah. That's really good advice.
Because they might have aurora mites on them or something else. So just kind of clean them up and put them off in the rain and burn them. Burning them, they just really waste.
I have lizards that hang around my hives
Yeah,
to eat the dead
bees.
bees.
They pick them off.
I love it.
And there's the trashes and other kinds of.
Yeah. So we're talking about the web of life, right? I mean, the more creatures you have, the more balance you'll have.
Now
Although
I
things
feel
get out of
bad
balance too.
smashing those yellow jackets, but seeing them attack your bees. Anyone else?
I have a small comment about.
Sure.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I was reading in one of the bee magazines about birds, quite a lot of kingbirds picking off bees.
Oh, yeah.
And apparently, this short article said that bees or the birds get stung by bees that they go after, and therefore learn to pick out the non-stinging.
Yeah.
They prefer the virgin queens out. They'll find the drone congregation zones and pick off the drones. The birds can tell which bees are going to sting them or not. They learn.
That's smart.
Yeah. I don't know if that's true. It seems unlikely, but I guess birds can be as smart as bees and people.
But anyway, I would see, I had the next door neighbor had their electric line. And the birds would come between 3 and 4 in the afternoon and sit there, the kingbirds, because that's when the drones were returning to the hive and they'd pick off the drones. That is so cool.
Very cool. Lewis?
Can you tell us about your entry in the Flow Hive, the contest?
Well, I don't think they have picked a winner yet. So yeah, but voting is closed now,
Voting
right?
is closed.
Yeah, voting's closed.
But
So.
say what it was.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Because
Okay, so
there's a chance we won.
yeah, there is a chance, and I don't like taking credit for this at all because it was totally Anita Amstutz that applied for this grant, and we all know, thanks to you, Chris, especially that we know about the Flow Hive, and so the company out of Australia that does the Flow Hive, I think they're just called Flow, right?
Well, it's the Flow Hive.
Flow Hive, yeah.
They did their first build-up was with Indiegogo.
Yeah.
They got their monies.
Mm-hmm. So they're huge. I mean, everyone knows about the Flow Hive. And so it was neat to see Anita. She applied for, I think it's a grant. And there's Anita's Berkey Bee USA and Think Like a Bee that applied for that grant with 10 other contestants. And so people were able to go online and look at what those different programs did, like Think Like a Bee, and then the 9 others, which I didn't pay attention to because I voted for our local group, Think Like a Bee.
Vote once.
You only could vote
Yeah.
once. Yeah, I actually tried to vote twice, but you have to put in your name. So anyways, I just thought that was neat. Can you still go and see it, Elizabeth? Do you know?
Oh, I think so. I looked
Yeah.
at it this
Yeah.
morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you have a chance, go check it out. It's neat to see us represented really internationally on that list. So we were number 1 as far as the choices go for the 1 through 10. So we'll see and we'll announce that when we find out who won that money from the Hive company. So thanks for bringing that up. Do you want to go ahead and break up into our groups?
Sure.
Okay.
So we were thinking just the quadrants, and I know, like the southwest, the northwest, the northeast, and the southeast. And then from there, if there's a big clump of us in the territory, in terms of the territory, we can break up into smaller groups too. So.
Okay, so I'm bad with direction. Which way is this? East?
So
Yeah. Yay.
southeast, southwest, and then northeast, maybe in northwest over there.
So do it like directionally?
Yeah. That's
Northwest?
Whatever, however.
I think that would make sense. Does that make sense to everyone? Maybe not. Northwest,
So
northeast,
over here, I'm in the northeast.
southeast, and southwest. And then as we break into groups, I'm going to go around and try to get the name and contact information of one person so that I can get you in contact with him about the state fair contest. So, thank you.
That's